Hello?
Hello, I'm calling for Ted Raimi.
This is he?
Hey, Ted, it's Rocco from Louisville, Kentucky. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Hi. Sorry, I wasn't able to pick up the phone earlier. I'm good. Thanks for calling me.
Yeah, no problem. Let me put you on speakerphone here.
Sure.
All right, you got me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't totally trust these machines is the problem, so I feel like I've become a nuisance.
No, it's fine. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're audible. You sound just like Ted Raimi.
It's me. Can you hold on one quick second? Let me get right back to you. Hold on.
Yeah.
Give me 5 seconds. I'll be right with you. Excuse me. Okay, yeah. Hit me. Thanks for thanks for calling me back. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I'm always afraid of situations like that I'm going to do it and I'm going to get whoever the person is, and they're going to be like, "Why did you just call me right back? Why would you do that?"
Yeah, it's weird. I know. Yeah, it's strange too because normally normally I'm totally happy to call reporters and stuff, but I asked my agent to have you give me a call just because I know you're under time constraints, and so I thought, well, if it's 6 o'clock, I may not. I'm already in whatever dinner making mode and stuff, so. I remember, my day may more or less be over, so I want to make sure that they remember, but no, it's fine.
Yeah. Well, here's 9, but I've been looking forward to it all day, so it's
thanks a lot, man. That's nice to hear.
Well, I'm a big fan, and I'm going to prove it to you. My favorite Ted Raimi role is Lunatic: A Love Story.
That's a strange one. Not many people know about that one. That's a weird one. That was my first big feature film. My first. I think it was the first.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it was the first. It was the first. I don't know. I can never quite figure out if. I think it was my first big indie movie, but I may have already done. No, I did one movie before that. I take that back, but it was the first one I ever started. Before that, I had done Shocker for the now late Wes Craven.
Yeah, right.
But then I did Lunatics, and that was a fun movie too. Yeah. Lunatics was a fun little picture. We shot that one in Pontiac, Michigan, and over a span of 3 weeks, 2.5, 3 weeks, and it was just a good little script. Josh Becker directed that. He did a great job.
Yeah, that's a really fun movie, man. I really dig it, and rented that because I had seen Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 right before Army of Darkness came out.
Right.
I won't tell you how old I was when that happened. I got bit by the bug, and really, so much of what you guys were doing there, your brother and Bruce, obviously, it really told me as a kid that you didn't have to just go work in a factory like your dad, and you also didn't have to end up being Harrison Ford, right? Like there's a middle.
Right, that's right. There's a middle ground in there, and there's a middle ground there is. Yeah, and if especially if you're in, you sound like you're a guy who was always in the movies, and I was too. And my mother really encouraged me to go into the business. I was lucky. I had very supportive parents. But at the same time, my parents had 2 separate successful retail businesses. They were doing that, and there was always this sort of temptation throughout my entire career to drop what I was doing when things got very, very hard and money got very, very tight, to go back to Detroit to do retail. Because I couldn't deny that they were both very successful. My dad was a furniture salesman, and my mother sold women's lingerie, and they had multiple location businesses. So I thought to myself, well, man, this, and I knew the business because I had helped them out. So it was always tempting, I wasn't one of these guys who, some of these actors, they have nothing to go home to.
Right.
There's nothing to go back to, there was, they're like, well, they wouldn't go back to their hometowns if, for any money in the world, but I liked my hometown of Detroit, and I liked my parents' businesses, so that was always a temptation to me. And it was challenging.
Yeah. At different points during your career, did you, like how close do you think you came on the doomsday clock to just calling it a day and stuff on the
That's a good question. A lot. All the time, and I'm not alone. I mean, there are, I don't want to name names not because they are such anonymous people, but because they may not appreciate me sharing that information. But I can tell you that I am absolutely not alone in many successful actors, directors, and writers in Hollywood wanting to hang it up frequently throughout their career, including at times when things seem to the general public like things are hunky-dory. I'll tell you a story. Here's the most prominent one for me that I can remember is after I had done 3 years on NBC's Sequest back in the 90s, and that was a really successful show. We did well. Our numbers were great. They dropped us just because we were too expensive. We were at that time we were the most expensive show on TV.
Always the thing with science fiction and genre shows is that they're pricey.
Yeah, they are, and this was a big deal. This was like the first really big budget TV, event show. We had, every show there were like dozens and dozens of CGI shots. Now today that's nothing. That can be done on, and it was a big deal, and only big studios could afford that. And and we had Universal and NBC, but I had finished that show and had 3 successful years, and I got back to Los Angeles, and it was for a time like crickets for me. There was no work to be had for like maybe 3, 4, 5 months. I was out of work, and it wasn't so much the money as it was just depressing to be out of work for so long. And so I had this, with those days I had this really reliable, I remember SL2 Saturn. It was a Saturn back in the coal company, Saturn, car company.
Yeah, I remember Saturn, yeah.
Yeah, and I owned a little Saturn. It was a great car. I had it since the beginning of the show. And I filled that freaking thing up with gas. I closed up my apartment. I sold all my furniture. I put crap in the back seat, and then I was just going to roll back to Michigan because I had it.
How old were you when you did this?
What'd you say? What was your question? Sorry.
How old were you when that happened?
I would have been, started 26. I was 29.
Right.
And I
old
just
enough
had
to really realize how scary that is.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so I had my car filled up, and I was still going out on auditions. I just wasn't booking anything, and then I decided to give it just a couple more days. So I unpacked my car, and meanwhile, everything is in boxes in the middle of my apartment. And I walked into Universal Studios to just say, I was sort of saying goodbye. I didn't say anything to my friends, but I was sort of saying goodbye. So I went into Universal and saw my friend Rob Tapper, who at that point was doing Hercules, The Legendary Journey, to say goodbye to him and stuff.
Right.
And, to see if he wanted me to say hi to anyone back home in Detroit. And he said, I'm doing this new show. It's called Xena Warrior Princess. It's a spin-off of Hercules. And would you might be interested in doing an episode? And I thought to myself, well, that sounds like fun. I didn't really know what the show was, and I had done a lot of television up to that point. But and guest starring and stuff. And again, it wasn't about the money, it was just constant, I was just tired of the business, At 30, I was already like exhausted, which you can believe it. And
I would imagine that it's very exhausting.
What's that?
I would imagine that it is very exhausting.
It is exhausting. It takes a lot out of you, emotionally and everything.
It's essentially frightening, too. You know what I mean?
It is. I do. I think that's very well put. It is existentially frightening. That's exactly what it is. And, you go, you push yourself as hard as you can, for at that point at 29, I was pushing myself for 11 years as hard as I could. Living on my own and everything. I'd moved to New York when I was 17, and so I've been pushing myself really hard. And then so I said yes, and then that did change sort of everything at that point. Then that was another 6 years of my life doing that show. And that was kind of awesome. Really was. And I was a wonderful years on that show, but yeah, I consider it all the time. To tell you the truth, I considered it about 3 hours ago. I'm not even kidding. I'm not even kidding you. This is so common, and it happens so often. It's so hard to get projects rolling. It's so difficult. You can get a project rolling, sure. You can make a crappy little $30,000 movie anytime you want to make a crappy little $30,000 movie. That's not hard. But then you have to ask yourself, do I want to just spend the rest of my life making crappy $30,000 movies? You know what I mean? And I don't want to do that. I want to do something of substance and something that's interesting. So that's where the rub comes in. Anyway, I don't want to make your interview so depressing, but you asked, so I tell you.
Right. So a question that will definitely be in the magazine.
Yes.
What is the role that you are most well known for when you're on the street? Do people know you because of Xena or because of Q-Lab or something else?
It all depends. If they come up to me and they've got, if they're tattooed with skulls top to bottom and they've got 15 nose rings and spiked blue hair, and they walk up to me, I know they're going to come up to me for Evil Dead.
Right.
And they're going to come up to me for Midnight Meat Train and Shocker and all the other, dozen horror pictures I've done. But if they have sort of the little, I would say, happy little twinkle in their eye and they look gleeful and they are clapping their hands together, it's probably Xena.
Right.
So that's how I know. It's really one of two things.
We're on one of those two things usually.
Yeah,
not often
right.
Q-Lab then?
Sequest, Sequest is sometimes Sequest, sometimes Sequest. Sequest, usually overseas, they tend to like that stuff a little more. I don't know why. It still runs fairly frequently in some countries. I don't really understand. It's a very old show, but it's weird. But
that was one of the very first places where they did a lot of digital stuff, right?
It was. In that show, we did a ton of digital effects. We had dozens and dozens in each episode, and that was a really big deal in those days.
Right.
That was a big deal. We had. No, it wasn't. I mean, remember, like when we were starting that show, one of the biggest shows on television at that time was Murder, She Wrote with Angela Lansbury. So that was the kind of television that was around in the early 90s. It was pretty boring stuff. And then we sort of came around and had this big, huge sci-fi concept show. I mean, there were the Star Trek spinoffs. It's not like we were the only one out there. But we certainly were the big boy on the block, and we had Steven Spielberg behind us at that point as well.
Right. Well, that certainly helps, right?
It does. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, anytime there's any sort of genre, anything, it's always funny to see how it works and how it clicks with people and what happens. I'm going to get to interview Bruce tomorrow. And I first met Bruce when I was 13 or 14 years old when Briscoe County Jr. was on the air.
Right.
And you're right. And he came to a local mall as Briscoe County Jr. and pretty much didn't break character. And like you were saying, you saw fans that were clearly Evil Dead fans, and you saw fans that were clearly cowboy show fans.
Right. That's right. Yeah. You really do get both for his show there. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. And I remember that I was like, wow, maybe this show will last the whole season. Like maybe there'll actually be a